Sarah Chen stood in her backyard observatory, a cobbled-together collection of salvaged satellite dishes and modified radio equipment that her neighbors had long since stopped questioning. At 12 years old, she'd already presented at 2 amateur astronomy conferences and written a paper on signal processing that was currently under peer review. But tonight was different. Tonight, her equipment had picked up something impossible. "That can't be right," she muttered, adjusting the gain on her receiver for the 100th time. The signal persisted, a perfect mathematical sequence that repeated with mechanical precision. Not random noise, not Earth-based interference, and definitely not natural. She'd discovered similar patterns before, but they'd always turned out to be human-made satellites or space debris. This was something else entirely. Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard, running the signal through every analysis algorithm she'd written. The pattern contained embedded information, complex mathematical theorems that seemed to build upon themselves like a cosmic puzzle box. But there was something wrong with the equations, something that didn't quite add up. She was so absorbed in her work that she barely noticed when her mother called her for dinner. "Just a minute," she shouted back, her eyes never leaving the screen. The mathematical sequence was beautiful, but it was also arrogant. Whoever had sent it clearly believed they were demonstrating superior intelligence, but they'd made assumptions, dangerous ones. The signal grew stronger as night fell. Sarah's instruments detected massive objects decelerating at the edge of the solar system, their energy signatures unlike anything in human records. First contact was about to happen, but not in the way anyone had expected. Sarah hesitated before making the call. Would anyone believe a 12-year-old who claimed to have discovered alien life? But as she studied the signal more closely, she realized it wasn't just a greeting. It was a challenge. The aliens weren't just announcing their presence. They were testing humanity. And they'd made a crucial mistake in their calculations. She picked up her phone and dialed the number for the International Space Agency's public reporting line. "Hello," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My name is Sarah Chen. I need to speak to someone about a signal I detected. It's important. The aliens who sent it think they're smarter than us, but they're wrong." The operator started to give her the standard response about prank calls, but Sarah interrupted, rattling off a series of numbers that made the operator fall silent. "Those are the first 100 digits in the sequence. They're using a base 13 mathematical system because they think it'll be too alien for us to comprehend. But they didn't account for human creativity. We don't just think in straight lines." Within an hour, her backyard was filled with government vehicles. Scientists in suits crowded around her equipment, their expressions growing more concerned as they verified her findings. Sarah stood her ground as they questioned her, explaining exactly what she'd discovered and why it mattered. "The aliens are testing us," she explained to the lead scientist, Dr. Rodriguez. "They're using mathematical principles they think are universal, but they're missing something fundamental about human intelligence. We don't just solve problems. We imagine solutions that shouldn't be possible." Dr. Rodriguez studied her carefully. "What makes you so sure?" Sarah pulled up a visualization of the signal pattern. "Look at how they're structuring their equations. They're showing off, trying to prove their superiority. But they're so focused on demonstrating their advanced technology that they've missed the elegant solutions. They think in rigid patterns. We think in possibilities." As if to confirm her analysis, new signals began flooding in. The aliens were no longer hiding their presence. Massive ships appeared in high orbit, their designs as mathematically precise as their transmissions. They looked down on Earth with what could only be described as technological arrogance. The first direct transmission arrived at midnight. It was a simple message, but its implications were staggering. "Prove your worth or be eliminated. You have one orbital cycle to demonstrate intelligence worthy of preservation." Sarah looked up at the night sky, where new stars had appeared, the engines of alien ships waiting to pass judgment. They thought they were being generous, giving humanity a chance to prove itself. But in their arrogance, they'd made a mistake. They assumed that intelligence could only follow one path, their path. They don't understand us at all, Sarah said softly. And that's going to be their biggest mistake. The countdown had begun. Humanity had 30 days to prove its right to exist, and their best hope might just be a 12-year-old girl who saw patterns that others missed. The aliens had come expecting to find primitive beings barely worth their attention. They were about to learn just how wrong they were about human potential. The alien ships hung in Earth's orbit like mathematical constants made real, perfect geodesic spheres that seemed to mock human spacecraft designs. In the 2 days since their arrival, the world's governments had moved from panic to desperate preparation. The challenge was clear: build a ship that could match their speed and efficiency, or face extinction. Sarah watched the latest test flight attempt from her laptop screen. The world's best engineers had worked around the clock to modify existing spacecraft designs, but each attempt fell short. The aliens' requirements seemed impossible. They demanded faster-than-light travel using only materials available on Earth. It was like asking Stone Age humans to build a jet engine. "They're still thinking too conventionally," Sarah muttered, sketching equations in her notebook. She'd been given unprecedented access to the international engineering team after her initial discovery, but most of them still saw her as a child who'd gotten lucky. Only Dr. Rodriguez, who'd been there on that first night, seemed to take her ideas seriously. "Talk me through what you're seeing," he said, pulling up a chair beside her workstation in the hastily assembled International Response Center. The facility had been built in record time, converting an old aircraft hangar into a think tank where humanity's best minds could work together. Sarah pointed to the screen where another prototype had just failed. "Everyone's trying to match their technology directly. But look at their ships. They're too perfect. They've optimized all the fun out of space travel." Dr. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Fun isn't exactly a scientific principle, Sarah. But that's exactly my point." She pulled up the original signal patterns she'd discovered. Their whole civilization is built on perfect mathematical efficiency. They've eliminated any solution they consider suboptimal. But what if the best solution isn't the most obvious one? Before Dr. Rodriguez could respond, the aliens sent another transmission. Their messages were always precise, always mathematical, and always subtly condescending. This one displayed a series of equations describing their propulsion system, a challenge within a challenge. The engineering team gathered around screens throughout the facility, their faces falling as they processed the implications. The aliens were using physics principles that human science had barely begun to theorize about. It seemed impossible to compete with technology so advanced. But Sarah saw something different. She jumped up from her chair, excitement overcoming her usual quiet demeanor. "They're showing off again. Look at how they're achieving faster-than-light travel. They're brute-forcing their way through space-time. All that power, all that perfect mathematical precision, and they're basically just punching really hard." Dr. Rodriguez studied the equations. "They're demonstrating their superior technology, Sarah. Their method works. But it's wasteful." Sarah grabbed a marker and ran to the nearest whiteboard. "They're so focused on proving they can overcome physics through sheer force that they're missing the elegant solution. Look at how space-time curves around their drive system. They're fighting against it instead of working with it." She began sketching, her hand flying across the board as she laid out a different approach. "What if instead of pushing against space-time, we sort of dance with it? Their ships are all about dominance and control. But space isn't something you control. It's something you collaborate with." The room had fallen silent as Sarah worked, her young voice growing more confident with each explanation. "Their drive system uses enormous energy to force a path through space. But what if we could find the natural paths that already exist? Like finding the current in a river instead of trying to power through it." Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward, his eyes widening as he followed her calculations. This is completely different from anything we've tried. You're suggesting we use the inherent properties of space-time itself." "Exactly." Sarah added another equation with a flourish. The aliens think they're showing us the only way to achieve faster-than-light travel, but they're stuck in their own assumptions. They've gotten so good at their brute force method that they've stopped looking for alternatives. A junior engineer raised his hand hesitantly. But we don't have the technology to generate the kind of energy they use. How could we possibly compete? Sarah smiled. We don't need to. That's what they want us to think, that we need to match their power to prove our worth. But look at the actual challenge they gave us. Build a ship that can match their speed. They never said we had to do it their way. The room burst into activity as engineers and scientists began examining Sarah's proposal from every angle. It was unconventional, arguably crazy, but it just might work. Instead of trying to overpower physics like the aliens did, they would work with the natural properties of space-time itself. We've got 28 days left, Sarah said, looking up at the alien ships visible through the hangar's skylight. They think they're testing us, but they're really testing themselves. Can they recognize a solution that doesn't fit their perfect mathematical model? Dr. Rodriguez put a hand on her shoulder. You know they won't like this. It goes against everything they believe about technological progress. Sarah's grin widened. Good. Maybe it's time someone taught them that there's more than one way to solve a problem. Humanity isn't just going to prove our worth. We're going to show them a whole new way of thinking. The challenge had evolved. It was no longer just about building a ship. It was about challenging the very foundations of alien logic. And perhaps only a child, unburdened by conventional assumptions, could lead the way. The prototype lab hummed with energy as engineers worked around the clock, transforming Sarah's theoretical breakthrough into reality. Her design called for something that had never been built before. A ship that didn't fight against space-time, but moved in harmony with it. The aliens watched from orbit, their periodic transmissions growing increasingly confused as they monitored humanity's unconventional approach. They're scanning us again, Dr. Rodriguez announced, checking the sensors. They seem particularly interested in our power consumption levels. Sarah looked up from her workstation, where holographic models spun in the air around her. They're probably trying to figure out why we're not building bigger power generators. In their minds, we should be frantically trying to match their energy output. Instead, the facility was focused on something very different. Sarah's design required precision rather than power, finesse instead of force. The prototype taking shape in the center of the lab looked almost delicate compared to conventional spacecraft, its hull designed to work with spatial dynamics rather than power through them. It's like the difference between a bulldozer and a ballet dancer, Sarah explained to a visiting quantum physicist. The alien ships are incredibly powerful, yes, but they're also incredibly inefficient. They're so focused on demonstrating their mastery over physics that they've missed its inherent beauty. The physicist studied the equations floating in the air. This is remarkable. You're essentially suggesting we slit between the spaces in space itself. But the precision required, one miscalculation and... That's why we're not calculating, Sarah interrupted, pulling up a new simulation. Well, not in the way they expect. We're teaching the ship to feel its way through space-time, like how your body naturally finds its balance without conscious mathematical computation. The breakthrough had come 3 days earlier when Sarah realized they were approaching the problem from the wrong direction. The aliens' technology was built on rigid mathematical principles, assuming that was the only path to advanced spaceflight. But Sarah saw something different in the equations, patterns that reminded her of natural phenomena on Earth. Look at how water flows around rocks in a stream, she said, pulling up a nature video alongside her spacecraft simulations. It doesn't calculate the most mathematically perfect path. It finds the path of least resistance naturally. What if we could build a ship that does the same thing with space-time? The idea was revolutionary, and more than a little terrifying to the traditional engineers. But as the prototype took shape, even the skeptics had to admit there was something elegant about the design. Instead of massive engines designed to brute force their way through space, Sarah's ship used a network of quantum sensors to detect and adapt to the natural flows of space-time. The aliens see space as an obstacle to be conquered, Sarah explained during a progress briefing. But what if it's more like a dance partner? You don't overpower your partner. You work together, feel the rhythm, anticipate the next move. The alien observers seemed particularly puzzled by the ship's unusual design. Their latest transmission contained a series of calculations demonstrating why the human approach should fail. The message carried their usual tone of superiority, but there was something new in it, a hint of uncertainty. "They're starting to worry," Dr. Rodriguez noted with a slight smile. "Your design doesn't fit any of their models for technological advancement. According to their understanding, we're building something impossible." Sarah grinned as she made another adjustment to the quantum navigation system. Good. Maybe they'll learn something too. Their whole civilization is built on the idea that there's only one right way to solve problems, the most mathematically efficient way. But nature doesn't work like that. Sometimes the best solution is the one that goes with the flow instead of fighting it. With 20 days left until the deadline, the prototype was nearly complete. Its hull gleamed under the lab lights, covered in sensors that would allow it to feel its way through space. The power systems were minimal compared to the aliens' enormous engines, but they didn't need to be powerful. They just needed to be precise. "We're ready for the first system test," the lead engineer announced. The room fell silent as Sarah initiated the startup sequence. This was the moment of truth. Either her unconventional approach would work, or humanity would have to find another way to prove their worth. The ship's quantum sensors came online one by one, creating a real-time map of the space-time currents flowing around the facility. On the monitoring screens, they could see what the ship saw, not just empty space, but a complex web of gravitational fields and quantum fluctuations that could be used for navigation. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered, watching the data flow across her screen. All this time, it was right there. We just needed to learn how to see it. The aliens sent another transmission, demanding an update on humanity's progress. Dr. Rodriguez drafted a carefully worded response, explaining that they were pursuing an alternative approach to faster-than-light travel. The aliens' reply was immediate and dismissive. There were no viable alternatives to their method. Sarah read their message and smiled. They're so sure they know everything. But that's their weakness. They've stopped looking for new possibilities. Sometimes the best way to advance isn't to get stronger, but to get smarter. The prototype hummed softly in the center of the lab, its sensors dancing with quantum possibilities. In just a few weeks, it would either revolutionize humanity's understanding of space travel or prove the aliens right about human limitations. But looking at her creation, Sarah felt only excitement. They were about to show the universe that there was more than one way to reach the stars. Dawn broke over the test facility, painting the prototype ship in shades of gold. The vessel, christened Harmony by Sarah, stood ready for its first full power test. Unlike the massive alien ships looming in orbit, Harmony was sleek and almost organic in design, its quantum sensors giving it an almost alive appearance as they pulsed with subtle energy. "Final systems check," Sarah announced from her control station. At 12 years old, she wouldn't be piloting the ship herself. That task fell to Commander Maria Santos, one of Earth's most experienced test pilots. But Sarah would be running the quantum navigation systems, the heart of her revolutionary design. "I still can't believe we're trusting the future of humanity to a ship that doesn't even have proper engines," one of the senior engineers muttered, loud enough to be heard. Dr. Rodriguez shot him a sharp look, but Sarah just smiled. "That's exactly what the aliens expect us to build," she said, running through her pre-flight checklist. "Big engines, brute force, maximum power. But Harmony doesn't need all that. She's going to show us a better way." Commander Santos's voice crackled over the comm system from inside the ship. "All internal systems are green. Quantum field sensors are active and responding. This is unlike anything I've ever seen." The aliens had demanded a demonstration of faster-than-light travel capabilities, expecting humanity to fail at replicating their technology. Instead, they were about to witness something entirely new. Sarah's design didn't try to punch through space-time. It would find the natural paths between stars that had always existed, hidden in the quantum fabric of reality itself. Initiating power-up sequence, Sarah announced. The ship's systems came online one by one, each quantum sensor adding to the complex real-time map of space-time currents flowing around them. On the main screen, they could see what Harmony saw, not empty space, but a dynamic web of gravitational fields and quantum fluctuations. Suddenly, alarms blared across the facility. "We're detecting an energy surge from orbit," the sensor operator announced. "The alien ships are. They're doing something." Dr. Rodriguez rushed to the monitoring station. "They're generating some kind of interference field. They're trying to disrupt our test." Sarah's hands flew across her controls, adjusting the quantum sensors. "They're scared," she said, a note of triumph in her voice. "They've realized we're not just building a copy of their technology. We're doing something they've never seen before." The alien transmission arrived moments later, their usually precise mathematical language showing signs of agitation. "Your approach is invalid. Cease this inefficient attempt immediately." "They really don't understand, do they?" Commander Santos said over the comm. "Ready to proceed on your mark, Sarah." Sarah took a deep breath, studying the quantum field readings. The aliens' interference was creating chaos in the local space-time fabric, trying to make navigation impossible. But they were still thinking in terms of force and control. Harmony was designed for something different. "Commander, do you remember what I said about dancing?" Sarah asked, making subtle adjustments to the sensor array. "The aliens are trying to disrupt the music, but they're actually giving us more to work with. All those distortions they're creating, they're just new patterns we can follow." Understanding flickered across Commander Santos's face. "Like how a good dancer can adapt to any rhythm." "Exactly. Initiating full power test in 3, 2, 1. Harmony came fully alive, its quantum sensors pulsing with ethereal light. Unlike conventional spacecraft that fought against space itself, the ship began to move in perfect harmony with the quantum currents around it. Even the alien's interference field became part of its dance, each distortion offering new paths to follow. The test chamber filled with gasps of awe as Harmony lifted off without a sound, moving with impossible grace. On the monitoring screens, they could see the quantum field readings spiking in ways that defied conventional physics. The ship wasn't forcing its way through space. It was becoming one with it. "Quantum coherence holding steady," Sarah reported, her voice tight with concentration. "Commander Santos, how does she feel?" "Like nothing I've ever experienced," the pilot replied in wonder. "It's as if the ship is suggesting where we should go. I'm not so much flying it as dancing with it." The alien's interference intensified, but it only gave Harmony more energy to work with. Each attempt to disrupt the test provided new patterns for the quantum sensors to read and adapt to. It was like trying to stop a stream by throwing rocks into it. The water simply found new paths around the obstacles. Preparing for FTL test, Commander Santos announced. The room held its breath. This was the moment of truth. Either Sarah's design would achieve faster-than-light travel using her revolutionary method, or humanity would have to find another way to prove their worth. Sarah's fingers danced across her console, helping Harmony find the perfect quantum resonance. "Remember, Commander, don't force it. Let the ship show you the way. The paths between stars have always been there. We just needed to learn how to see them." Harmony's quantum field suddenly synchronized with something deeper, something that had always existed in the fabric of space itself. For a moment, reality seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a flash of silent light, the ship slipped between the spaces in space itself, achieving what the aliens thought impossible. Not through force, not through overwhelming power, but through understanding and harmony with the universe itself. Humanity had just shown that there was more than one way to reach for the stars. The alien flagship descended from orbit like a mathematical equation made real, its perfect geometric form casting a shadow over the test facility. After witnessing Harmony's successful FTL test, the aliens had demanded an immediate demonstration race, their proven technology against humanity's impossible innovation. Sarah stood at her control station, trying to calm her racing heart. The aliens had chosen a course that would take both ships to the edge of the solar system and back. Their ship, which they called Perfect Logic, represented millennia of technological development. Against it stood Harmony, born from a child's understanding that there was more than one way to dance among the stars. "They're still trying to understand how we did it," Dr. Rodriguez said, reviewing the latest alien transmission. "Their sensors recorded the FTL jump, but they can't explain it. It doesn't fit any of their models." "That's because they're looking for the wrong thing," Sarah replied, making final adjustments to Harmony's quantum sensors. "They expect to see massive energy expenditure, spatial distortion, all the brute force methods they use. Instead, we just stepped between the spaces they never thought to look for." Commander Santos's voice came over the comm from Harmony's cockpit. "All systems are ready. The aliens are, well, they're being very insistent about starting this race. I think we wounded their pride." The alien ship hung in the sky like a challenge, its presence a reminder of everything humanity was supposed to be too primitive to achieve. Their final transmission before the race carried both threat and confusion. "Your method defies known physical laws. This contest will prove the superiority of proper technological advancement." Sarah smiled at their choice of words. "They still don't get it. They think this is about proving their way is the only way. But we're not trying to prove them wrong. We're showing them there's more to discover." The countdown began. On the ground, teams of scientists and engineers held their breath. In orbit, the alien fleet watched with what could only be described as collective skepticism. Everything humanity had worked for came down to this moment. Race begins in 3, 2, 1. Perfect Logic leaped forward with overwhelming force, its massive engines tearing a path through space-time itself. The display screen showed the incredible energy readings from its drive system, enough power to light up a small planet. This was how the aliens had always done it, how they believed it must be done. But Harmony moved differently. As Sarah monitored the quantum field readings, the ship began its dance with space-time. Instead of fighting against reality, it flowed with it, finding paths that had always existed but had never been seen before. "They're pulling ahead," Commander Santos reported calmly. "Their raw acceleration is incredible." "Let them," Sarah replied, watching the quantum patterns shift and flow. "They're so focused on proving their power that they're missing the shortcuts. There, do you see it?" Through Harmony sensors, they could see what the aliens couldn't, subtle quantum currents that curved through space-time like rivers between stars. While Perfect Logic plowed straight ahead with overwhelming force, Harmony began to slip between these currents, moving with the natural flow of the universe itself. The alien ship's lead began to shrink. Their transmissions became increasingly agitated as they poured more power into their engines, trying to maintain their advantage through sheer force. But Harmony kept dancing, each movement bringing it closer to its competitor. "They're starting to realize," Dr. Rodriguez said, watching the sensor readings. "Look at their scan patterns. They're trying to figure out how we're keeping up with a fraction of their power usage." The race continued to the edge of the solar system, Perfect Logic blazing a trail of raw energy, while Harmony followed the hidden paths between spaces. But as they turned for the return journey, something remarkable happened. The quantum currents Sarah had discovered weren't just passages through space. They were shortcuts in space-time itself. "Now, Commander," Sarah called out. "The pattern is perfect. Ride the flow." Harmony synchronized with a particularly strong quantum current, and in a moment of transcendent grace, slipped ahead of Perfect Logic. The alien ship's energy output spiked as they tried to compensate, but they were still thinking in terms of force and speed. They couldn't see the easier path that had been there all along. The race ended with Harmony crossing the finish line, a full 30 seconds ahead of perfect logic. Using less than 1% of the energy the alien ship had expended. The silence that followed was profound. When the aliens finally transmitted again, their mathematical language had changed. Gone was the absolute certainty, replaced by something that could almost be called humility. Your method requires further study. We have much to discuss. Sarah looked up at the alien fleet through the facility's windows. They came here thinking they were going to judge us, she said quietly. Instead, they learned that there's always more to discover. Even after thousands of years of advancement, the universe can still surprise you. Dr. Rodriguez put a hand on her shoulder. You've changed everything, you know. Not just for humanity, but for them too. You've shown that true advancement isn't just about power or efficiency. It's about seeing the beauty in the dance, Sarah finished, watching as Harmony landed gracefully beside its massive alien competitor. The universe isn't just a problem to be solved or a force to be conquered. Sometimes, you just have to learn how to move with it. In orbit, the alien fleet began to shift, their perfect geometric formations changing into something new, something less rigid. They had come to Earth expecting to find primitives barely worth their attention. Instead, they had found teachers who showed them that even the most advanced civilization could still learn to see the universe in a new way.